It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Cam out on YouTube has a question for you guys. Do the guys have any advice when it comes to starting a family and managing an emergency fund? How do you know if you have enough without knowing what new expenses are coming? Do you do double the fund? Is there some other rule? How should you think about that as you maybe kind of get nervous about the unknown?
Well, think about what an emergency fund is. This is to keep your financial life out of the ditch. So you have to kind of take into account all of your personal factors that you can control. The job. I mean, because what type of employment is going on in the household? If you only have one person working, that's a bigger risk to the household. So you need to probably lean more towards the 6 months on the 3 to 6 months. If you have two households where both people are making about the same amount of money, that might lend itself back to the 3 months. If you have, one person makes a great income, but it's a very specialized, that's going to push it back out because it's going to take them much harder to get there, to find another job. You might even have a relocation, so that's going to push you even further out on how much you need to have in cash reserves. You need to first do a risk assessment to figure out your personal variables that either mitigate the risk, meaning that can lean it closer to 3 months, versus increase the risk, which would want you to have more cash to keep your financial life out of the ditch.
All right, Ribby, I have a question for you, right? So this was Cam starting a family, thinking about it. So it's crazy. We have a resource right here at our disposal. You recently have gone through this thing of starting a family, right? You just had a baby. Did you and John have conversations around this unknown of oh my God, what's a baby going to cost? Are there some things that were especially anxiety inducing to you before you had the baby? And are there things you've seen now that oh, I didn't think about that, or maybe I should have thought about this?
Yeah. One thing that I didn't fully think about, or maybe I just have a better understanding of it now, in the first few months to a year, he hasn't cost me a lot. Besides medical, how you're going to have the baby and the medical expenses, You do have to think about that for sure. And honestly, that's kind of, I feel what I was nervous about and just had to plan for and do a lot of research on. But we had some generous family members that gave us, we had a crib, had the car seat. I don't know, there's actually not a ton more we've spent a lot on. Even diapers, we've just had to start buying diapers. We had some people give us diapers. And even that's you can budget that in reasonably. So I will say, just to calm the nerves, at least for that first year, generally it's okay. Other thing is, we just kept following the financial order of operations. We had our deductibles covered. We had, 3 to 6 months of savings. And then, we talked about okay, if we have to dip into this for X, Y, or Z having to do with this baby, what are we going to do after that? Okay, we're going to go back and shore that up for the next few months. That's what we talked about. And so I am really thankful for that 9-step thing, just because we can look at, okay, this is the step we're on. If something kind of goes off the rails and we end up back on this step, it's okay because we've planned for this, and, we can replenish that emergency fund. And so that's really what we looked at, our deductible amount and our 3 to 6 months of living expenses, factoring in both of our jobs and things like that. So I hope that helps. I know it's a simple answer, but it really is true. I wouldn't stress too hard about oh my gosh, this baby's just magically going to take all of my money right away. That has not been true for me. So I don't think it'll be true for you either. Most likely, life can throw you curveballs, but
I do want to give you and your spouse a compliment, though, because you've shared with us previously, your first year of marriage, your spouse said, hey, let's not use credit cards because I want to know what we spend. Because I think a lot of people, it's not just brand new families. This is also people considering retirement. I'll say, hey, what's your monthly spend rate? And I'm always amazed that people can't give me that number. They're not tracking. They haven't done the homework of actually budgeting to know what they're spending. You and your spouse strike me, y'all know what you spend a month.
We have. Right now, like I said, John's been doing the budget and I haven't been looking.
So there are some things. But that's...
but it is true that we have this cadence of we know when we need to sit back down and look at it. And we've developed that into our life.
That's what I think the guidance I would also give Cam, because I've given you some of the variables you should consider, but also make sure, have you done the homework? Have you actually done the full budget so you know what your expenses are? Because it's easy for any financial pundit to say 3 to 6 months. And you're like, oh, I've heard that before.
Yeah, but what is 3 to 6 months actually?
That 3 to 6 months has a lot built into it. It's got a lot of homework of you better know what your spend rate is, because it does blow my mind. Very successful families that come to us and I say, hey, we've got to do your retirement plan. We need to figure out what your monthly spend rate is so we can know what the retirement looks like. And then people say, I think we spend $4,000 a month. And then you start working through it, and you're like, you do not spend $4,000 a month. You didn't take into account this. You didn't take into account this. Do not skip that step. I know it's not a fun step. I know it's one of those things we've talked about. We don't love budgeting, but you better know what your spend rate is so you can do all the right planning off of it.
Yeah, here's a really fun thing that you can do. It's super. One, you should use a tool. You should use a budget worksheet. You should use an app. You should use something. But maybe you're just so anti that. Do this. Go pull last year's tax return, back out. So take your total income, back out what you paid in taxes, and back out what you saved. It's going to give you a pretty good idea of what you spent, right? And if that number, like you say, I spend $4,000 a month, but it turns out that you're burning through way more than that, you have some sort of discrepancy. Reby said something so beautiful. There was a statistic, Brian, we used to talk about this a number of years ago. I'm sure it's changed. The average cost of keeping a child in your household from 0 to 18, it used to be $250,000. That's what they said. You would spend an additional $250,000 over the course of your child going from 0 to 18. Now, obviously, that depends on family circumstance and lifestyle and all kinds of stuff. What's beautiful is it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like day one, you got to start just doling out money. You kind of get to grow through that and learn through that. Cam, the advice I would give you is that there's going to be a lot of unknowns when that baby shows up and things start changing and spit up starts coming up. Just kind of take it and roll with it, and you'll be able to adjust and figure it out. Like Reby said, go back to the drawing board, track your expenses. Some stuff gets out of whack, figure out how you can adjust, go back to the drawing board, But it doesn't have to be something that is overwhelming and terrifying and daunting. It is certainly a manageable task.
And I know this is, once again, Financial Mutants overthink things. If you wait until you can afford every dollar, you may never have children.
Yep.
I mean, it is one of those things. I look back, because I was married 5 years before we had our first child. I think I might have done it 2 years sooner.
Oh,
just telling you, as an older guy,
sure.
And I just had my oldest child just graduate high school. I think about the fact that because I was such a planner that I wanted to make sure I had this in my career figured out. I wanted to make sure I had this. Looking back on all the things you want to accomplish, being healthy, travel, and do things, take all that into account too. If you wait until you can truly afford everything, it's going to be okay. Don't overthink this. And I think that I need to say that for whatever financial mutant is sitting there saying, I'll just wait another 1.5 to 2 years because I want to have this. Yes, planning's important, but if you think you have to have it all figured out, you'll probably never become a parent.